Hey everybody, this is Charlie from Anthrax, and you are listening to the one and only Hyper Manic Noize podcast. Turn it up.
What the fuck is going on? Welcome back to the Hyper Manic Noize podcast. I am your host, Hayden Douglas, and it's wonderful to have you listening to this bullshit yet again. Today's guest is no stranger to listeners of the show. His name is Andy Dowling. I've known Andy for, about 10 years. I met him when I was playing in my old band, Enlightened by Darkness. Andy was, at that time, the bassist, or guitarist? Bassist. I don't know. Bassist, I think, for a band called Sedition in Brisbane. He then went on to join the power metal band Lord after Dungeon fell apart. If you don't know who they are, pull your fucking head out. Lord is just about to release a new album called Fallen Idols. It's coming out on August 1st. They're on tour now. So if you're listening to this, check the dates. Get online at www.lord.net.au and find out if they're in your city. If you don't know Andy from Lord, you probably know him from the Andy Social podcast or the Self-Starter podcast. Self-Starter podcast is all about starting your own business, getting a side hustle going, basically anybody following their passion and wanting to turn that into an income stream. And as far as the Andy Social podcast, who hasn't he talked to? He's talked to Josh Richards, who is a candidate for the Mars One project. He's talked to the guys from Gas Digital, including Louis J. Gomez, the famed comedian, and Puerto Rican Rattlesnake. He's talked to John Farnham's guitarist. Yeah, how fucking sick is that? Cross-dressing wrestler Ladybeard. He's talked to Nat from Nat's What I Reckon. What more do you want, man? He's talked to fucking Leroy Loggins, dude. Leroy Loggins from the Brisbane Bullets. So, there's his credentials, and there's enough reason for you to fucking listen to this chat with Andy Dowling. Please support him, andysocial.net, selfstarter.com.au, and of course his band, lord.net.au. And this chat's been broken up into two parts. Part one is basically all about living in Central Queensland. We sort of touched on this. I've been on Andy's show. He's been on my show. He's back on my show. And we've talked a little bit about our experiences growing up in Central Queensland. And this time, we go fucking deep. And we cover basically most of the good stories, I reckon, that I've got from my time in Central Queensland. And a few of Andy's are in there. And we have a good old yarn about that. So part one of this is the Central Queensland Chronicles. A warts and all journey into what it's like to live in the devil's arsehole, aka Central Queensland. And then next week, part two with Andy, where we get a little bit more philosophical. We talk about mental health, our own views, the world at large. Basically, yeah, it's a very different speed. So I figured, given that we chatted for over 2 hours, fuck it, let's split it into two, because it's two very different chats. The first half is fucking hysterical, and the second half I think is really valuable and really interesting. So thanks for tuning in. Please give the podcast a like or a 5-star rating or a positive comment wherever you listen to it, on YouTube, iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, wherever the fuck you're listening to it. You know how you got it. Please share it with your friends. Share it on Facebook. Facebook is being a right turd about exposure and reach these days. And basically, unless you give them a kidney, no one fucking sees your posts. So please, share the shit out of it. Tell your friends. Tell your mum. Andy Dowling is in the house, and you're listening to the Hyper Manic Noize podcast. Fucking dig in.
Podcast initiation complete. Warning. This episode may cause brain damage.
Hey, this is Trevor Sternat from the Black Dahlia Murder here. You're listening to the Hyper Manic Noize podcast.
Mr. Dowling, how you going?
Yeah, awesome. Yourself?
Very good, man. So, Andy Dowling from Lord, if anyone doesn't know, if anyone hasn't heard, check out the previous podcasts we've done. We've done one on Hyper Manic Noize, and we've also done one on your podcast, the Andy Social podcast. And, yeah, I think we've covered a lot of important issues, really.
We have. We've touched on quite a bit. We've put a few hours under our belt so far, so I'm looking forward to adding a little bit more to it.
Well, we got a little bit into John Barry last time, which is so a skeleton that hasn't come out of the closet in many years, been sniffing bike seats all over the state.
especially when there's potentially, that there is a real John Barry, and for me it was a mythical made-up person, but for you there was like a real-life John Barry lurking around the traps.
Never got to meet him, though.
No, that's right. The mystery is still there. I reckon, actually, a slight tangent, but we'll get back into this. There's a documentary that's just about to come out about, there's a basketball player in the NBA in the late 90s called Bryant Reeves, and his nickname was Big Country, and he played for the Vancouver Grizzlies.
Okay.
And there's a documentary that's coming out in the next, week or so, and there's a few articles about it. And basically, he played in the league, and he was like this high draft pick. He had so much potential. He did really well in his first season, and then he started to get fat and just went really shit. And then he just disappeared from the league. I think he got injured, but then no one could track him down. It's been 20 plus years, and no one can find this guy. So this documentary is all about trying to track him down, because he's from some small town in Oklahoma, and they've tried and tried and tried, and nobody can draw a link as to where the hell he's gone or whether he's still alive. So now I'm thinking maybe we could do a documentary very similar for John Barry.
Yeah, we could probably find his DNA on some bike seats, you know? Get that black light out around Rocky and see what we find. In Rocky, you'd find a lot.
That's it. So first of all, we've got to do a roundup of every bicycle seat in Rockhampton. We'll go and put them in a compound, and then we'll spend the next 6 years, forensically testing every bike seat. You can do the sniffing. I'll get the swab out.
Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to do. You read my mind.
I'm a delegator.
I'll tell you what's funny. So a similar sort of story. Years ago, there was a guy that got signed to the Canberra Raiders for the Rugby League. His name was a massive dude. I think he was Tongan or from New Zealand or somewhere. Anyway, he went on the footy show and he won the strongest guy in the NRL competition or something. And all this hype around him, he's so big, he's so strong, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, played one reserve game. I think he hit someone, punched him he got injured, and then that was all anyone ever saw of him. And he was from Rocky. So,
oh, right, wow.
Anyway, I'm going out with this crazy bitch in Rocky, and then we're hanging out with her next door neighbours. And the girlfriend, the girl that lived next door, her boyfriend was. I was like, holy shit! There we go. Here he is. He's back in Rocky. He was playing for the local team, and then I told my dad, "Hey, Dad, guess what? That footy player is going out with the girl I was dating's neighbour." And he said, "Oh, shit, you didn't tell him your last name, did you?" And I went, "No, why is that?" And he said, "Well, because Dad was a fraud investigator for Centrelink." I might have to beep his fucking last name out here. But he's like, "Yeah, I stung him for he was playing professional football and claiming the doll." So, yeah, I think I definitely have to beep out part of the guy's name here. I didn't really think about that.
Oh, what a story! A woven connection of little stories that have all made up this scenario where everybody is just it's a small world, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm going to beep his name out, so I might as well go the whole hog. So we're hanging out with him, and my missus at the time says, he's a psycho. I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Oh, well, he some guy went up and was chatting to his missus at a nightclub, just saying hello, and he smacked him and broke his jaw."
Wow.
So, but it gets better, because I dated her 10 years ago or something. And then just about 2 days ago, I looked the guy up to see whatever happened. Did he start playing footy again? Whatever. And a couple of years ago, I think 2 years ago, he was in court for breaking a guy's jaw. It was the same guy. They broke his jaw again.
Once bitten, twice shy, or twice bitten, third time shy.
Oh, fuck if I know. I don't know. I'd be staying home.
Wow.
But that's
how
Rockhampton.
Funny. Oh man, I love those stories. I love how just things come around and there's a little hook in the story, a little turn, an unexpected turn, but it all links back in together.
Yeah.
I love it. That's how some of the best movies in the world are written. But that's a real life example of some entertainment there. But you said, I think it was at the end of either on my podcast or either yours, and right at the end we sort of ran out of time. But you made a mention of like where you lived in Rockhampton and your neighbours and the people in your area, and you're talking about like, I think there was a pedophile, there might have been somebody, a murderer or something like that. And we sort of left it on this cliffhanger. And I can't remember whose show it was on, but I remember going, oh, man, we have to talk about a little bit more of
That
this.
was on your show, actually. So
Right, yeah.
I was getting ready to move to Perth. Had the house ready to go. I was sort of, leaving my job, just finding other jobs until I could get one over here, all that sort of stuff. And, so directly over the back, I'm in the house one day, I hear a knock on the door. And there's these kids, and they say, your fence is on fire. And, the silly old bitch over the back had decided she didn't want her weeds, so she just set the fucking backyard on fire. And then my fence and compost heap caught on fire. And so there was that. And then within a few weeks, I'm on the phone to my mate saying, oh, dude, I can't wait to get to Perth. I'm so sick of it here. And then I look on the diagonal back neighbour, and there's a car on fire. One of the kids was trying to, I don't know, playing with a lighter in the old bomb car or some shit. And then the other side, they stole my basketball jerseys off the line. I had a cool LeBron James jersey that I bought in Italy.
Oh, right, yeah.
And they stole that. And then next to that house was where, you ever heard of Leonard Fraser?
Oh, the name rings a bell.
The Rockhampton rapist?
Oh, no, man. I don't know. No, it doesn't ring a bell at all.
Well, you're not up with the rapists of, but he's like one of the most notorious serial killers in the country.
Yeah, I may have seen that name pop up in the media
You
somewhere
would have.
over the years. Yeah,
Lenny the Loon, they called him. Did you remember how there was the girl in Rocky called Kira? What's her name? The girl in the cupboard. Did you ever hear?
Yeah, maybe.
Natasha Ryan, that was her name. So, Lenny, I'm in year 8. I'm riding home from school, and there's this bushland, and I'd say 1 out of every 2 days I'd ride through the bushland, and the other day I'd ride past it just to, got to do some sick jumps on your BMX. Just depends how you feel. And this one day I ride past, I don't go through the bushland, and then later that night I went out with the family, and there was just police everywhere, spotlights, all this all this stuff so you couldn't see in. And there was fucking, 100 police, SES, the whole box and dice. And it turned out this guy, Lenny Fraser, had killed a little girl and raped her in that bushland in that half-hour period that I rode home from school.
Wow.
So, and people saw him knock her on the head and drag her in there, adults that were sitting on their fucking front veranda, and they didn't do anything.
Oh.
So even as a year 8 kid, I would have done something, like run across the road and scream, something. But, for whatever reason, I didn't ride through that day, and there was hundreds of kids that could have been going through there at that time. But anyway, he got caught not long after. And funnily enough, my stepdad actually was in the SES and had to go out to where they found her and fucking crawl through the bush looking for remnants and all this sort of stuff. But it turns out he was, he knocked off a bunch of ladies. Beverly Lego, there was another, he killed her in an abandoned building near the nightclub district. And there's a bunch of others. But the twist in this tale was he got charged for the murder of Natasha Ryan, who was a 14-year-old girl in Rockhampton who just disappeared. And he was on trial for her murder. And then there was a tip-off. Turns out she was alive. She was living 800 meters from her fucking parents' house. So she'd run away because wanted to be with the boyfriend who was way older. And every time the police or whatever would come around, she'd hide in this cupboard. And she was there for fucking 7 years.
Wow.
So that fucked up their case against him because they're like, well, shit, we charged him for this murder. She's alive. But he'd already had, I think 5 confirmed murders and a bunch of others. But yeah, it was hell, it's like Days of Our Lives, that town.
Oh, there needs to be a movie. There needs to be not even a movie. It has to be like a Netflix or HBO series that just goes for 12 episodes, and each episode's like an hour and a half a pop, and you wouldn't even scrape the surface. I mean, like just that thing that you were saying about just that one day you decide not to go through that parkland. I mean, who knows? Like your life could have been so dramatically different had you made a decision, spare of the moment, go, fuck it, I'll go that way today. And like, who knows? I mean, it could have been like the most important moment of your life about, yelling out and blah, 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 or it could have been the most tragic thing that could have possibly happened. And who knows? But that decision was made. It's sort of like that really shitty movie, Sliding Doors, where, she gets on the train or she doesn't get on the train, and depending on which one she takes, then her whole life changes. And it's like that. It's so crazy, man. It could have been, and who knows what other sort of things happen on a day-to-day basis where we just decide to like drive it on a different road at a different time, or walk somewhere, or just talk to a particular person instead of somebody else, just at a particular time, and just we could be brushing ourselves closely to some crazy set of circumstances that we're just so oblivious to. It's insane. I love this stuff. So good.
Well, it's weird how it all works, man. I knew a guy. It was a friend of my ex. I can't remember his name because I always knew him as a nickname. But he was driving his car and went off the road, and basically the car spun around sideways and hit a tree, and the car was essentially cut in half. And if he'd been an inch further forward or an inch further backwards, he would have died.
Oh.
So then a couple of weeks later, this guy wasn't one of those guys that could do legit backflips on his bike. He could have been a professional mountain biker. He was that good. Riding home, did just a little bunny hop that you or I could do, even in our old fragile state. His foot slipped. He came off, broke his neck. Now he's a quadriplegic. And so, like, he cheated death, and then 2 weeks later was doing something that a 7-year-old kid can do. And this guy could, like, I'm not even kidding, man. He could I think he used to ride his bike in trees. Like, he was insane. And then he just slipped off doing something normal and tetraplegic, quadriplegic.
Oh, man. That's like, I mean, talk about the worst possible. I mean, I'm sure there's always something that can top a situation, but man, that's like some absolutely tragic luck. I mean, how like when someone talks about a tragic story, it's not usually under like the dumbest of circumstances or the most simplistic of circumstances, but for something like that, and especially having that absolutely like one in a lifetime moment of escaping death, and then the
it's fucked
long after, it's just it's crazy, man. It's like and not that you should laugh, but it is comical because it's just so ridiculous. It's just such a ridiculous set of circumstances.
I just imagine how high he was for those 2 weeks. Like, fuck, I'm so happy to be alive, and then
I'm gonna eat healthy now. Yeah, I'm not gonna drink anymore. I'm gonna be good to all my family and friends, and I'm gonna make something of myself. I'm gonna do something really good. Blah blah. Bunny hop.
Done.
Done. Oh, that poor bastard.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Did you ever go to Frenchville Primary School, or did you go to Mount Archer?
No, I went to Park Avenue. So
right.
So we had some of the inter-school cricket and rugby league, little comps with some of those schools. But we were Povo PA. I always thought that we were like the real sort of Povo part of Rockhampton.
Yeah, you were. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. It was certainly felt at the time, but it just just a rough area. I'm surprised. Like we lived there for as long as we did and went to that school. It was just rough. But we're PA.
Yeah, well, that's where my house was, where all this shit was happening.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah. Well,
wow.
You're lucky in a way because our groundskeeper was a pedophile.
Well, we had a groundskeeper that ended up at I think he might have gone to Frenchville or Mount Archer, and he just died not too long ago, like about a month ago. but he was there for yonks. But as far as I know, I don't think he was a pedophile. But maybe I don't know. No, I've got no concrete proof to prove that one.
Well, even when we were at school, you know, he would always help if the cricket ball went over the fence. You know, he'd help boost the kids over the fence and give them a bit of a grab on the way over. But he was. This isn't funny. I don't know why. I'm only laughing because it's so fucked up. But he was.
That's it.
He was molesting my mate's sister, and like the way they found out was she was going to the tuck shop. I don't know if they call it that. Do they call it that in Sydney, or is that just a regional thing? Oh,
I don't know. I don't know what it is down here, but I'm used to tuck shop.
They also call it the canteen over here.
Oh, canteen. Yeah, canteen's so American.
I know.
I hate that.
Me too.
Yeah, it's a tuck shop. Fucking.
Well, they all laugh at me for calling it the port rack, where you keep your bag.
Oh, well, but that's exactly what it was. It was a port, and there was a rack, and it sat on the veranda outside the classroom, and you put your port in there.
Yeah, but everyone's like, port's a drink.
No, okay.
It's
we didn't
WA.
we didn't drink port, you know. So,
no, well, we were 12.
Yeah.
We weren't divorcees in our 60s.
Just LA Cola.
But yeah, the way they caught the groundskeeper, because this girl, I'm not going to name her obviously, but she was going to the tuck shop with like $20, $30, just balling, and they couldn't work out where she was getting all this money, because these are the days where you could get a pie, a sausage roll, a drink, and some lollies for $2.
Yeah.
And she's rocking 50s and 20s, and then that was how they caught him.
Oh no! Oh, how bad is that? Oh shit!
Yeah, I feel for that poor kid.
Man, so I mean, look, I'm sure. We both lived in Rockhampton, and so we can trade these stories. And you've been there for a longer period of time than I have. So there's a lot of stuff that you're telling me, and it's like, oh man, that's absolutely crazy. But no doubt there would be so many places in regional Australia, and especially regional Queensland, where this shit has just happened as well. I mean, I'm sure Rockhampton's got its own unique magnetism, but I reckon there's so many places around the country that have just got just so many fucked up stories.
Well, that area though, it really is a fucking hotbed, because so there was a girl that used to, when I was in my early nightclubbing years, there was this girl that used to go around, you know how there's always a girl or whatever that sells roses at nightclubs, and when you're trying to get lucky, buy one for a girl?
Yeah. Well,
she was the rose girl. And she was lovely. And, you know, I bought many a rose that led nowhere, but I tried. But anyway, one day on the news, her ex went out to where she lived and hacked her to death with an axe. And then again, my stepdad had to go out there with the SES and fucking sift around in it's brutal shit, man. But that's home, you know. That's why I love it. That's why I miss it. It's got a beautiful history.
A colourful history.
Yeah, well, you obviously remember Mount Morgan.
I do.
So anyway, anyone listening, Mount Morgan was the biggest gold mine in the world in the 1950s, and then when the gold dried up, they filled the lake full of water. I filled the hole full of water, and it's now poisoned with arsenic, and it sits precariously above the town. And there was no work there, so everybody pissed off. And now it's full of pedophiles and crack addicts and stuff because the rent's so cheap. So it's 100 times worse than Rocky.
Because they've got, I don't know if it's still there now, but they used to have the thunder egg farm up there. You used to go up there and get the pick out and dig for thunder eggs. Yeah,
I went there. I've got some happy memories, but that did close down. I don't know if it's still closed. It did close for a while because one of the holes collapsed and killed a kid. See what I mean? Every happy memory we've got has some sort of caveat.
I love it. I love it.
It's fucked up.
Yeah. There has to be a book. There has to be a series. There has to be. I reckon there should be a Rockhampton podcast. Just start one and just make it a series. Like, you can cap it at whatever, so you're not overcommitting. So just go, I don't know, like 10 episodes or whatever. And then if it's a roaring success, then you can extend on it. But I reckon a story an episode, and I reckon you'll just uncover some gold. I mean, I think you've probably got enough stories on your own
to
do several years of podcasting. But I reckon there's going to be a big thing with podcasting over the next few years. I reckon people are going to start up all these amazing series of like just fantastic stories of just the most ridiculous shit that's gone down in people's lives in different areas, different clusters of people, and stuff that's been forgotten or is just, you know, shared amongst friends and doesn't go any further than that. And I reckon this sort of stuff, I mean, even us talking about it now, there's going to be a bunch of people listening to us going, oh, fuck Rockhampton, I am never going to go there. When I'm going up the Bruce Highway, I am not taking the right-hand turn on that roundabout and going into Rockhampton. I'm going north and I'm not going to stop.
Oh, well, look, you can drive through. Just make sure you've got enough fuel to make it through. When you see the cow statues, you've reached Babylon. Just keep driving till you stop seeing cow statues.
I love it, man. It's a nostalgic trip. It's there's some absolutely shocking memories, but you know, the good thing that we have is that we've survived and we're here today to laugh about it.
Yeah, it's because we got out.
That's right, we got out. We got the hell out of there.
Yeah, it's. I knew I was going to leave when I was about 12. I just knew.
Yeah, you already had plans?
Well, I just knew there was nothing there for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, you look around and you see all these fucking sad cases and it's just, there's nothing.
Well, I mean, that was a big thing, especially because I growing up, I was born in Redcliffe. I lived in Cunnamulla, which was 10 hours west of Brisbane. Then I lived in Emerald, Central Queensland.
Oh, God.
Then we moved to Rockhampton, and Rockhampton's, I don't know, 5 odd years. And then moved to Brisbane. And then after that, moved to Sydney yonks later. But I, like, living in those three regional areas, Cunnamulla, Emerald and Rockhampton, it was the same everywhere. And it was the same fucking, like, there's nothing to do. And so I think when you're in a place where it's dead, and I think Rockhampton's obviously a bit more built up, but in comparison to your metro areas where, you know, there's more opportunity in those built-up areas, people just get a little bit stir-crazy. There's a bit of cabin fever and, you know, people get bored, so the kids muck up and they get into all sorts of trouble. And when you get into, especially sort of teenage years, then it gets really crazy. And then, so you get to that point where when schools start getting close to ending, there's two groups of people. There's the group that stays, and for the most part, those people are the delinquents that just never, they haven't developed enough, or they've killed off all their brain cells by the time they've got to the end of high school, that they can't see anything else apart from existing in their own excreted fluids and just existing in that space. And then the other part, or the other section, are the people that have already made up their mind years beforehand and understanding that they need to go to, in this case, Brisbane, or going to Sydney or to Melbourne or to a larger town or city, because there's just nothing there. There's absolutely nothing there. And I think it's different now because I think people are a lot more connected and there's more opportunities and blah, blah, blah. But I think there's still a heavy stigma. And I think, you know, you always hear about people moving to the big smoke, or all the kids when they, you know, finish high school and they're going to go to university or just get a job or just move somewhere else and start a life where they think it's going to be better.
Yeah, well, there is a lot of that, you know, now where people are taking the leap and trying to make something of themselves, but there's still a huge proportion of people, like, I know people that still live with their parents that are my age. And
me too.
Yeah, and people that are like, the furthest they will ever travel is Brisbane and maybe Melbourne.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah, and I think I mean, you said it before with the Mount Morgan example where, you know, when you've got a relatively cheap area, it's affordable living, then you, unfortunately, and you can and like, it might be a stereotype, but you're going to attract a certain type of person. And it's just going to be one of those things where it's a different economic class, and with that comes potentially a bunch of problems, more than likely. And so it's just, you know, and I might be over generalizing the whole thing. There's probably a whole bunch of people that would take advantage of affordable living and be really good people. But unfortunately, and like, I'm down the south coast of, you know, a couple hours south of Sydney, and it's the same sort of thing down here. there's an eclectic mix of people, but there's people that have just never left the area. Like people that don't even know what Sydney is for the most part. They've never gone up to Sydney. There's no need to. Why would I leave? Because I've got everything here. Or they're just too lazy, or they don't own a car.
Yeah.
And you've just got a lot of affordable living, and just it attracts a certain type of person. And so there's different issues that you have in the area, in the community, and it's different, or it stands out more than your metro areas. But I think it's the same everywhere, especially in those regional pockets. But I guess for both of us, Rockhampton's got a close place to our heart, so
Kinda, yeah.
we can connect to it much more.
Well, I mean, since I've moved to Perth, I've been back to Rockhampton for 2 weddings, once to put my friend, to record tap phone calls for the police, once for his murder trial, and once for my grandmother's funeral. So and now I can legitimately fly to Bali and back from here for $200 or pay, $900 to fly to Rockhampton.
Hard decision, eh?
Yeah, or I can fly to Japan for the same price. I think it's about an extra $250 to get to LA. So I could either do stand-up at O'Dowd's or the Comedy Store. You pick.
Just make sure you take enough time to really sort of weigh up the pros and cons of those options.
Well, I love the fact that nobody knows the suburbs, the places we're referencing, but anybody listening is probably writing down, do not visit Rockhampton.
Yeah, that's true. we need a Rockhampton handbook, a little handbook that just gives an outline of each suburb, places, landmarks, places to avoid, and just little local tips and bits of information so you can assimilate into the community without anybody noticing that you're from out of town. So little comments, jokes, things to show the locals that or that you're a part of the community and you know what you're talking about. Just those little quirky things. We can sell it. We'll monetize it. I'm sure it'll be a bestseller.
I think if you wear a fuck off, wear full shirt, you'll fit in quite well.
There you go. I was overcomplicating this, and there you go.
Well, I said this to someone the other day. I went to Brisbane when I was 18, and I said to my mate, "Wow, I've never seen an Asian person working in a fast food restaurant." And it was just an observation, but isn't that absurd? Like living in a major city. Because, Asian students work so fucking hard. They'll work multiple jobs and they work a lot of those jobs. If you go to any fast food restaurant, there's people from India or China or whatever working there. But where we came, where I lived for 23 years, we had one Asian family in a school of 1,000 people. There was no diversity. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, I remember the first time that I met, an Asian person who had an Aussie accent, and my mind was blown. I couldn't even work out what was going on. I thought it was in the Twilight Zone. I just could not wrap my head around how somebody visually, and my stereotype of what I think that person should sound like, had a full-blown Aussie ochre accent, and I just couldn't get my head around it. I couldn't understand that there could even possibly be a reason that their parents migrate over here and this person was born here. I had this absolutely crazy assumption that every Asian person has literally just got here. And and all of them have got a heavy accent and they all like the same things and blah, blah, blah. It's just like the total, just ignorant, sheltered, just way of life. But that's what it was up in most regional centres for so many years, where we just weren't exposed to diversity at all. And that's why Queensland's so fucked up, because they're still 20, 30 years behind. They're still predominantly white, and the only mixture of diversity is Aboriginals, and they can't get along, and so that you've got all those issues there. So there's so many problems. But I mean, I remember I totally relate to that story, because I've gone through similar things and thought about them in my head, and then later on gone, oh my God, like I cannot believe that I even had that assumption in my head of somebody or a person of a particular background or whatever. And it's crazy. And I've constantly, for years after I sort of moved back to Brisbane and then eventually to Sydney and sort of getting out there and traveling and going across the world and meeting all these different people that, all these ridiculous fucking stories in my head and assumptions of what the world is were just completely shattered. And it was, thank fuck that it happened, because otherwise, we'd be stuck up in Rockhampton and, I don't know, voting for Pauline Hanson.
Yeah, well, see, as a kid, though, it's just the innocence of youth. You're just taking in whatever's around you. And then I found myself spouting shit, and it's embarrassing to admit, but in my late teens, early 20s, stuff about immigrants. And then I went, hang on, do I believe that? And then I read into it, and I didn't believe that. It was just what you said where I was from.
That's it. And I have a lot of compassion for people that still hold a lot of these crazy views when you understand the context, and exactly for that reason, where if you look and see where this person's from, you look at their environment, you see their upbringing, and sometimes you stereotype a little bit to make an assumption, but I think when people understand that, what other bit of information has this person got to work off? If their entire life has been based off a certain environment, a certain group of people around them, and no diversity of interactions or even just thoughts and opinions and anything to challenge them, and they haven't travelled, they haven't done anything, then of course they're going to be fucking warped in their opinions and be ignorant and not have a clue about the world or anything like that. There's just no way. So, but it's hard because you want to, the knee-jerk reaction is to call someone out and get triggered and, just absolutely rip someone apart. And I certainly get those feelings sometimes, but then you sort of think, well, fuck, I mean, they've got no chance. You've got to at least make an attempt to sort of give them something to work with so they've got a chance to change their mind. But, oh man, it's just crazy that we're so connected than ever before with the internet and information, but we've still got these pockets, and it'll be a long time before it changes. But yeah, I'm very similar sort of path to you with just growing up in those types of environments as a kid.
Yeah, and there's some people you just, like my dad, he's not going to change. And I've told him about working at the school with all the refugee kids and how they're amazing and how they're 100 times better than any white kid I've ever worked with, and how the worst behaved refugee kid I've ever worked with is better than the best behaved Aussie kid I've ever worked with, and all that, but he hasn't changed his mind at all. And the funny thing is, he calls me his PC boy sometimes, jokingly. And I'm like, fucking hell, I get in trouble for my stand-up act all the time. I'm not really PC. I'm just not a racist asshole.
Oh man. And look, I think a lot of opinions that people have, and you give compassion, but also you've got limits with people as well. And after a while, you can give people as many opportunities as they want, but in the end, they've got to want to change, and they've got to want to seek different information, and they're going to want to have to learn more about the world. And if they've got no inkling or no motivation to do so, then what do you do? And most of the time when people sort of lash out and make crazy comments or make opinions, it's usually out of fear anyway. There's some underlying fear of the unknown, or not being used to something, or something being outside of their comfort zone, or a person that they've never interacted with, and there's a fear attached to that. And it might not even be a conscious thing. It's something that's subconscious, but it forms a lot of the opinions that we have. And at least these are the things I tell myself, which calms me down when I just read the most disgusting bile on the internet. I go, no, that person just doesn't know better. Or maybe that person lives in here. Oh, I'll give some compassion to that person, but there's some bad stuff out there.
Well, I can't remember if I told you this. My dad moved from Queensland to Tasmania, so racist Mecca to racist Mecca, really. And I shit you not, and I'm going to quote him here, so nobody get upset because these aren't my words. I said, Dad, what's it like in Tassie? He goes, oh, it's great. There's no bungs here. And I went, oh, okay, why is that? And he goes, because they fucking shot them all. Like, that was his first thing. Like,
oh, shit.
Not about the weather or the house he's got, or, it's a laid back lifestyle. That was the first point of, I've got to let him know about this. Okay, sure, man.
Yeah. Oh, it's just, oh, man. I mean, there's a generational thing, there's an environment thing, there's, especially, our parents growing up and what was available as far as information and the way that people were portrayed in, the radio, the TV as it came into play, newspapers, magazines, all that sort of stuff, the way that people portrayed, and it wasn't PC. There was so much stuff that was just very very out there and scandalous in so many different ways, and in other ways it was so overly conservative. It was such a weird time because in some ways it was just free for all, and in other ways it was still so conservative, and so it just bred a particular type of person for the most part. And and I think as people get older, they get stubborn. Why change? And people fear change the older that they get, and so it's hard. My parents are pretty good overall, but they're religious. They go to church, and if you're going to ask for religious parents, they're probably not the best ones going because they're pretty chilled. They don't really give a shit about what anybody else does. They just get on with life, and they get a thrill out of their community and their friends and going and doing things each week and whatever. I don't feed into it. I don't agree with it. There's nothing that excites me about it whatsoever. But, at the same time, they've come from a generation where it was just a different way of life, different way of thinking. And so for them, they've built opinions and views in the world, and for them to change, it's really, really difficult. So I kind of get it. It doesn't make it right whatsoever. And it's that whole clash between baby boomer and the next generations, Gen Y and Gen X or whatever, millennials now and all this, and it'll just continue to happen forever on. And each generation's going to hate the next one and vice versa.
Yeah, pretty much. It's a fun ride, humanity.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. But we're on the same path, both of us, as far as our ages and what we've seen happen, and us just trying to learn and work out where we fit into the world. And I guess we're going on our own paths and forming our own opinions of what we think's right in the world. And no doubt, 20, 30 years' time, the opinions that we've got, and I hope to hell that I've got enough flexibility in my mind to remain open and not be critical, but who knows? I'll probably be a stubborn old equivalent of a bigot or whatever when I'm older anyway as well. So, who knows? I can get on my high horse now, but I don't know what the future's going to bring.
Thank you guys for listening to the latest episode of the Hyper Manic Noize podcast. It's been episode 41 with Andy Dowling. And as I said earlier, this is part 1 of my chat with Andy. Part 2 is coming out next week in episode 42. And we get a lot deeper, a lot darker, and bare our souls a little bit more. And it's definitely a different speed to this week's show. But that said, I think it's definitely probably more valuable on an intellectual level in a lot of ways. Probably less entertaining comedically, but I think equally as entertaining for your soul and your little heart there, mate. So tune back in next week. Please follow the Hypermanic Noize podcast at Facebook.com/Hypermanic Noize with a Z. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Old Mate Douglas. I've got plenty of ridiculous jokes, stupid content, and hip-hop music coming as well. A lot of my listeners are metalheads. I get it, so am I. But I also like a bit of hip-hop. And if you listen to it, you'll fucking dig it too. Trust me, cunt. Get on board with Andy. You know where to find him. I've said it all already, and we'll see you next week.
Now I'm on the upswing. I am invincible. Don't panic, I'm a little bit manic, charismatic and erratic, ecstatic for the mania. Satanic, I'm addicted to the rush. I'm just a little bit manic. Don't panic, I'm a little bit manic, charismatic and erratic, ecstatic for the mania. I'm just a little bit manic. I'm just a little bit manic. Self-doubt can get fucked and leave with his throat cut, wrapped up in a shit rug, chucked into a dump truck, locked up, beaten and broken. If you think you're getting back into my head, you're joking. Messed up but not corrupt at the core. Bipolar as fuck, it's tough to hold on. Been a slave and a victim, too self-doubt and religious, stressed about death when I should have been living. I'm faster than the manic, charismatic, erratic, ecstatic for the fucking mania. Satanic, I'm addicted to the rush. I'm just a little bit manic.